Hi, and welcome back to the channel. My name's Nick, and I'll be your host. You are watching Legends of the Force. Now, today, we're finishing up our first video, Top 10 Strongest Sith Lords, except now we have the top 5. So, can't wait to give these to you. Please, before we get going, drop a like, subscribe, etc., etc. It really helps the channel, really helps me and my family. It's very appreciated. The more you do that, the more Star Wars we get to talk. So far on the list, we have Darth Plagueis at number 10. We have Ajunta Pall at number 9. For number 8, we had Darth Bane. For number 7, Naga Sadow. And for number 6, Tula Kord. So, who's in the top 5? More on that in 3, 2, 1. Our number 5 is going to be Darth Revan. Now, Revan's a super interesting character in the Star Wars universe because to me, he's like the chosen one before the chosen one. Easily the most important figure of his era, which was, I believe, we're talking like 2,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, maybe 2,500, and then a few hundred years after that. So notable things about Revan. He was a master of the light and dark sides of the Force. Not when he was Darth Revan, of course. That was all dark side. But his mind was retooled by the Jedi Council after his apprentice turned on him. They recovered his body, and they did stuff like that. He wasn't the Dark Lord of the Sith for long. He was actually only the Dark Lord of the Sith when he was, because his mind was dominated by the Sith Emperor. And he was supposed to go back to the Republic and just soften him up a little bit before the big guns came in and took everybody out. However, his will was so strong, and he was so strong in the Force, that he was able to shrug off that command and instead wanted to take over the Republic so that he could prevent them from being taken over by the Sith Emperor. You might think they're on the same side, but that cat was way more evil than like anybody else. In any case, Revan's skills were absolutely legendary. Darth Plagueis said Revan was power. It was like staring into the heart of the Force. She said that of her time teaching him. So he was capable of manipulating Force bonds to great effect, which meant that he could influence the will and emotional state of anybody who he was connected to. He used this to great effect when he was the leader of his armies as a Jedi and as a Sith. He could drain the life from people with the Force. His holocron, actually his Sith holocron, which was hidden on the Rakatan homeworld of Lehan, was discovered by Darth Bane, and his philosophies and magics informed the basis for what Darth Bane would have his new Sith Order centered around. His contribution to the dark side was of a very high magnitude, and he might be higher on this list if he just remained the Dark Lord of the Sith for longer. But, you know, after he regained his memories, he was able to redirect energy at an extremely high rate, being a master of the light and dark sides. So he'd do this little diamond thing with his hands, sort of like the sign you do for Jay-Z or Kanye right at one of their concerts, and he'd be able to suck in the energy of like Force lightning and then redirect it. That was an extremely unique application of Tutanimus, which is energy to redirection. This worked really well against a Council Dark Lord, Darth Nihilus, in the Revan novel, but it wasn't quite up to snuff when he went against the Sith Emperor. So, very, very powerful, almost Anakin Skywalker level. He's at 5 because he just wasn't the Dark Lord for very long. And honestly, if he snapped to his senses, which he did once he came back to having all of his memories, he might be higher on the list. But I just can't put him above anybody else who's ahead of him, because the rest of these guys have really, really unique feats attributed to them, and a couple of them even have sort of godlike levels of power. So this is where he's going to be. Our number 4 for this is Darth Plagueis, Emperor Palpatine's master. We first heard of Darth Plagueis in the Revenge of the Sith movie when Palpatine used his legend as a Sith Lord who was so strong in the Force, turned his sight inwards so much that he could influence midichlorians and create life. And indeed he could. But that's not the only thing he could do with the midichlorians. He was always naturally sensitive to the workings of these force channeling organelles, and he spent the vast majority of his life studying their workings. So by the end of his life, he was actually able to repair his own damaged tissues. He was able to reverse his own aging, which among Sith Lords is a unique feat. You've seen them all. They kind of look like 6 feet tall versions of Gollum. So he was actually going to get around that. He was going to be the only guy. He was able to induce pregnancies in animals. He was naturally capable of all the, offensive capabilities that come with being a Sith Lord. He could, create illusions. He had very powerful skills in Force Lightning. His telekinetic skills were nutsy. His Force Scream would burst your eardrums. I mean, there are all these normal things. But in addition to that, he and Palpatine actually did, they took part in a meditation that tipped the balance of the galaxy toward the dark side, and which is a theme you kept hearing about in the prequel trilogy. The dark side clouds everything. We can't see the future like we could. And that was him. And also, Palpatine and he engaged in a meditation shortly thereafter, and this is where they overstepped, that produced these cell divisions that became Anakin Skywalker. However, as Darth Plagueis says, the Force resists the call of ravenous spirits. And right after that, all the animals in his lab died. Anakin Skywalker came out, the chosen one of Jedi prophecy, but sort of. I think there's a little bit more to that. And then Palpatine killed him in his sleep. But he faced the dude up. He was so confident in his ability to regenerate his body that instead of throwing a rock at him with his mind, he just let him sit there and toast him. And it just turned out that Palpatine's raw power was able to overcome the power that Plagueis could muster after being at a disadvantage. So Darth Plagueis, extremely powerful, really a harbinger of what was to come, and that's why he's at number 4. Coming in at our number 3 is a guy who was in the Knights of the Old Republic 2 as one of the main antagonists. His name is Darth Nihilus, aka the Lord of Hunger. I almost considered including Darth Sion on this list, who is sort of his, he was his peer in the Sith duumvirate that came from the Sith triumvirate. But Darth Sion's a bit of a brute, and he was just so hateful that his body just came together. So we're going with Darth Nihilus. Now, Darth Nihilus is special because of the immense amount of Force energy that he was able to garner from his ability to devour, in some cases, entire worlds and drain them of all their Force energy. However, this is what both empowered him and put him, I guess, low for a guy who can do all. I mean, he drained, a couple hundred Jedi plus at one point, and you'd think that that'd do it, but his body couldn't take it, and neither could his humanity. So he put his consciousness, or what was left to of it, in his mask, his robes, and his armor, and he basically walked around like a wraith from Lord of the Rings. He was extremely powerful. I mean, his Force lightning was ridiculous. He could drain the Force naturally from so many at such a high degree that it's hard to put anybody above him in that sense, except for maybe one person. And his will was crushing. It basically just magnetized little bits of Force energy to him from whoever was around him and made them more like him. Which is sort of a shocking feat that has only, again, been done by one person. The only way that he died was by the exploitation of his hunger. Basically, he was tricked into going to a place that was supposed to have a bunch of Jedi, and instead was evacuated, and he had to duel Mitra Surik, or the Jedi Exile, the main protagonist in Knights of the Old Republic 2, on an empty tank. But if it weren't for that, he might have lived forever, and there wouldn't be a galaxy to have the first movies about. But, number 3. He's so high on the list because he's not human, but he's also as low as he is because he's not human, and he lost the ability to really reason the way a human being could. He wasn't as strong as he might have been if he had his body and his full consciousness. So, our number 2. This might get me a little bit of hate. I hope not. I hope you understand where I'm coming from, but I'd be happy to explain it in greater detail in the comments or in a message. But this is going to be Darth Sidious, aka Emperor Palpatine. I know that's like the 3rd time I've said aka. I'm going to have to find another thing, maybe I.E. G. What? No, but George Lucas says that Darth Sidious is the most powerful Sith Lord ever. I just don't see that. But that being said, I think he's more powerful than everybody else on the list, save my number one. Darth Sidious was sort of an antichrist figure. He was 100% in line with the dark side. He had natural power that was on a level of, I feel like it was around Yoda's. It was like at Yoda's or maybe a little bit higher because of that meditation that Plagueis and Palpatine did to tip the balance of the Force toward darkness. I mean, they actually had their midichlorian counts increased by that. So there's something to be said for, the time he was living in. But Darth Sidious was like a master of Force lightning, maybe the master. We saw a little bit of that in Rise of Skywalker when he conjured a Force storm that somehow just targeted the rebel ships and left his alone. I mean, that level of control is insane, and I don't know if we've seen anything equaling that in any of the previous written or filmed materials. Also, in Legends continuity, he was able to use the Force and sort of like a Force lightning mechanic to rend holes in time and space. And so he could use this with great control at the end, and even used it to bring Luke Skywalker directly to him with a wormhole. His alchemical skills were at the tippy top. He had access to all of Naga Sadow's teachings on the subject, and also the accumulated resources of the Sith Order that Darth Bane started, which was financial resources, knowledge, all sorts of things, these age-old allegiances that had just been active for like 1,000 years. All of this was Darth Sidious's, and it's no wonder that he was able to overthrow the Republic. So there was that, but I think his most important skills, the skills that we see him use to the greatest effect, most subtly, lay in mental manipulation and projecting his visions of the future into the present. For instance, I feel like the dark side was him, and he was the dark side. And he's said things like this before. Other people have said things like this about him. But I truly feel as though he was able to sense every current of the dark side, at the same time, by the way, as being invisible in the Force as a Sith Lord and visible as like a normal human being, which is an illusion he kept up for years. And he was able to bring out these darknesses and turn the people who bore them into actionable resources. Also, I think in Revenge of the Sith, we see his ability to outpicture the future that he wants. So he sees this super dark future where Anakin betrays the Jedi and becomes Darth Vader. And what does he do? He uses the same words that Mace Windu was using, which is, he's too dangerous to be left alive. He uses those to convince Anakin Skywalker to kill Count Dooku. And he makes Anakin bring that guilt into the room with him right before he cuts off Mace Windu's hand. He also was able to, from that future, take the images of Padme dying in childbirth and project them into the present, magnetizing Anakin Skywalker to that future. Add to that he basically tossed Darth Maul, Darth Vader, Savage Opress, Count Dooku, everybody who faced him around like a rag doll. I mean, they had no chance. He might have been the most skilled lightsaber duelist in the galaxy at that point, and I truly don't believe that Mace Windu beat him fair and square. It was just too convenient. If he beat Mace Windu, if he was standing over Mace when Anakin walked into the room, yeah, you probably don't have Darth Vader. So again, despite what George Lucas says, I'm calling poppycock on that. It just doesn't hold together, in my opinion. So Darth Sidious is at our number 2. Please let me know if you feel like he should be higher or lower, yada, yada, yada. But that's where I'm putting him, because our number 1 exists. And who is that number 1? The Sith Emperor, otherwise known as Vitiate. Now, Vitiate is another sort of antichrist figure, and basically he was an uber academic. Like, he wasn't even regarded as a martial threat, which is one of the reasons that he was able to bring 8,000 Sith Lords and Acolytes to his planet, Nathema, to grant himself immortality. So when they got there, he immediately dominated their minds, which is absolutely insane. No one's ever done anything like that, dominating the minds of 8,000 people very strong in the Force. And he used them to create a ritual that wiped the planet clean of all Force energy. It gave him all of that power. People speculated on the mechanics of it. A lot of people thought that he entrapped the spirits in his body and he was constantly feeding from them. But however it works, his power level was off the charts and I think unequaled. He lived for over 1,500 years. He was able to possess numerous bodies at once. He was able to create channels for his will by planting his consciousness into embryos. And he could apply, his strength and his will directly through these embryos at times. He was the master of the unquestioned master of this entire Sith Empire, including the Dread Masters who use the Phobos devices, another video on them later, to grant them extremely high levels of power. He maintained this mind domination and was even able to overwhelm Revan with it eventually, or modify Revan's will. His Force lightning overwhelmed Revan's skill with Tutanimus and fried him. Revan just came from reducing one of his council members to ashes. Vitiate fried Revan because Revan couldn't take all that power. The Sith Emperor was able to create physical duplicates of himself in battle using sorcery, and he could bestow immortality. Who can do that? No one. No one can bestow immortality. And to kill this guy, one of the guys that he bestowed immortality upon, Lord Scourge, and the Outlander, and honestly, almost everybody, there are video game upon video game, storyline upon storyline of people doing this Voldemort-like Horcrux hunt to destroy all of his anchors to the physical world before he could die. He set up another empire in another body while he was the Sith Emperor and then after his supposed death. I mean, and you could go on and on. I had to heavily condense the evidence of his power. But suffice to say that when you have a guy who basically could have eliminated all life from the galaxy and had to be worked against by numerous powerful Force users over the course of hundreds of years, so they'd even have a chance. I mean, you can't rank anybody above this guy. To me, Vitiate, the Sith Emperor, is the unquestioned number one. And thank you so much, everybody. That was our top 10 Sith Lords. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe and drop a like on the channel. Our next big video will be our top 10 most powerful Jedi Masters, which will be interesting to me after doing this because I think there's a different criteria for being a powerful Jedi than there is for being a powerful Sith. Also, check out our shorts. I have one of the Gensarai already, and I have another one on the Falanasi coming. And we'll be keeping on with these obscure Force-using groups. I just love them so much. And for every one of them, there's sort of a real-world counterpart, which is even more fun. We might get into that later. But for now, thanks so much for watching the video, and cue the outro.